Can an AI app build faster than a developer, or at least make the development process much smoother? That's the question we're going to be trying to answer today. We're going to be going through a full breakdown of everything you need to know about how to create an AI-powered app in Base44. Now, there are tons of ways to build software. Believe me, I know. And with the rise of vibe coding tools, there are tons of them out there that are allowing people to build apps with no code. But the biggest difference between these is the drag and drop ones, which are no code, where you just drag something, drop it, and it handles everything behind the scenes. And these new vibe coding platforms, which allow you to type in like a prompt, like ChatGPT, and automatically get a full app generated from scratch, and allow you to customize it from there. So today we're going to be taking a look at everything you need to know about Base44, from how to actually write your prompts and structure them the correct way that will allow you to have the best results, or just go through the whole app design process and know how to avoid the common pitfalls of app development. So with that being said, we're going to get right into things and show you everything you need to know about how to use Base44 and how to create some amazing looking apps using just prompting alone. So with that being said, let's get into it and show you everything you need to know, starting with the prompting. Signing in is as simple as literally hitting the sign in with Google and getting to this screen. What are we going to build today? Describe your app idea below or get inspired by our templates. Now, the biggest thing here is to describe the main difference between just describing the app you want to create and actually looking at the templates. Because if you don't know exactly what it is that you're trying to create, you're going to have a much harder time prompting it the correct way to actually get the best outcome. So that's why it's so important to take careful time to prepare before you actually get into building anything or actually hitting enter. As we can see here from this screen, we can simply go ahead and describe the app we want to create. But we don't want to get into that right away because there's a couple different frameworks that we can use depending on the type of app or website we're trying to create. So let me go through just a few of them. The first one we actually have here, as it says, some ideas to get started, are things like CRMs, dev productivity, educational tools, content generation and editing, personal finance, health and wellness, productivity, travel planning, entertainment, environmental, home management, and creative tools. And these are just a few ideas to get started. Now, the best way to get started here is to look at the templates for how we can actually make the application look. And that's in terms of the colors, fonts, etc. Now, if we click on this thing that says styling instructions here, we can select a user interface style for the application. Now, as it says, this is going to influence the visual design and components. And there's a couple different oones that you can choose from. Neo-brutalism, bold colors, high contrast, thick borders, which to be honest, kind of doesn't look good to me at all, but it's used by Figma, Gumroad, and Stripe Press. And if we hit add style instructions, it will add that into our prompt. But I'm not for that right now. We also have things like neumorphism, soft, extruded UI elements that appear to push through the surface. And again, it doesn't really stand out or contrast. There's also glassmorphism, which is what you'll see on something like an Apple device, material design, which is what you would see on Google applications, claymorphism, which is what you're going to see in Headspace and Duolingo and Clubhouse, and ideally, whatever type of app you're trying to build is entirely influenced by your UI, because your UI is going to subtly communicate to your users what it is exactly that your application is about before they even look at it. If I look at an application and I see the user interface look raw, unfiltered, brutal, it's going to give me a much different impression as opposed to transparent and blurred. And that's important. So before you actually go rushing into the features, choosing the one that best suits your application and the way you want your application to be perceived is the best way to go about doing things. Now, let's say for instance, for this tutorial that I'm going to do a finance app, whether that's budgeting or tracking or something that's going to say, I can store my information about my money here and make it nice and safe and clean and effective. So the question becomes, if I'm creating a personal finance or budgeting tracker, what do I want my users to feel when they see it? Do I want them to see this and think raw, unfiltered, brutal? Do I want them to think soft and tactile? Do I want it to be transparent and blurred, elevated and structured, or soft and puffy? Well, to be honest, I think we should start by eliminating the ones that we don't want to put in. Soft and puffy feels too much like a kid's application. It feels like we're catering to toddlers, so that one's out. Elevated and structured is pretty good. Transparent and blurred is pretty good. Soft and tactile, though, feels a little too mute. There's no colors, and it really doesn't give me the best impression because it feels too static and robotic. And raw, unfiltered, brutal, we're not even going to consider that one. Personally, I think for the most trustworthy application, Apple has done a good job at conditioning users to trust them, to feel like the application is smooth, calm and has this glass morphism elegance to it. So in our case, we're going to go with this one. And all I need to do is hit this button that says Add Style Instructions. And this is a great way to give you an example of what an excellent prompt looks like. This entire prompt alone right here is just to get that same glass morphism style. So for the entire rest of the application, we need to make sure that our prompt is as specific as physically possible. Because whatever it is that we're building, if we want to make sure that we're going to get the best result, we need to be as detailed as physically possible. And as we can see here, we have like 7 or 8 lines just talking about the style alone, as it talks about elements should have subtle light borders, apply backdrop blur, the design use should be unique, colors should work well together. But now we actually want to talk about what the application is about. And to be honest, the best way to actually prompt it is by starting at the top. Talk about the title and talk about the main purpose of the application and the problem that it is solving. Because like anything, this piece of software we're going to be creating is going to be used by someone for something. And ideally, that's used by someone who can have a problem solved. Now, it's important to be as specific as possible here to give Base44 all of the information required to get the best result possible. We're going to give it the name right off the bat. 5 spaces the name of the application. And it is a personal finance tracker for part-time restaurant employees. We're making it very specific in this case, part-time restaurant employees, or even we could just say restaurant employees. So let's talk about exactly what it means to be a restaurant employee. It's a personal finance tracker for restaurant employees, aged, let's say, 18 to 36, with a primary focus on tracking personal expenses, tips, hours, including commute to and from work, as well as tracking shifts picked up and notes regarding work or career. What we're essentially going to do with this application is kind of create a blended space for restaurant employees. We're going to make it half of like a career and shift tracking app, as well as a space that they can actually put their tips and their paychecks in, and just basically tracking their finances within it. So this is kind of the idea. And I actually just thought of a better name for the application. So we're going to call it FoodFi, like food finance. So we're just going to call it FoodFi, and it's a personal finance tracker for restaurant employees with a primary focus on tracking personal expenses, tips, hours, including commute to and from work, as well as tracking shifts picked up and notes regarding work or career. Now, we've given it the primary audience, we've given it the primary problem it's solving, but we have yet to talk about what the application is actually going to do. So let's talk about it. Now, at this point, we're either going to say directly whether this is a web application or whether it is a mobile application. In our case here, we're simply going to say this will be a web application primarily used on desktop computers. So at this point, we've stated the platform, we've stated what it actually does, but we haven't stated any of the specific features we're going to be using. So we could either let Base44 go and create that all itself, or we could be hyper specific about the features we want to solve. So we need to include those and be as specific as possible in what the user will be clicking on, how it will be stored, all of that beautiful information. I've added a few more key details here, talking about the specific features in the application. I talk about how the budget tracker is going to be on the home page, along with relevant notes and shift details entered by the user. The second page is going to be a tips tracker, where the user can track their tips based on hours worked. And additionally, they can enter how much each paycheck was in order to effectively estimate their earnings per shift. So let's say, for example, they work 4 days a week and they work 8 hours each shift. Well, looking at how they did last year or the year before that, how much are they expected to earn for that particular shift, assuming they still work it for that particular month. And then I like to finish with an overall statement. What is it this app is doing right? What is the main thing that we need the AI to ensure that it carries to the actual app MVP? So in our case, the final one-liner I've put in here is the overall goal is that the user feels like this web application is educating them about their own finances and helping identify trends so they can make smart money choices. Now, at this stage, assuming I don't know anything technical, I could just go ahead and hit enter. But if I do know a few details about what sort of web framework I want to use, for example, or what I want it to be written in JavaScript, Python, like could be anything. Ideally, I would put that here. But in this case, I'm just going to leave it blank because this assumes that you know nothing about how to actually code and can go and just do this from scratch. So we're going to go ahead and take this hyper detailed prompt and hit submit. and see what the application actually creates for us. As soon as we hit enter here, we're going to see that our entire prompt is laid out directly on the left-hand side. We've got everything from our design choices to our actual individual feature sets, and we can see that this is where we're going to communicate with the AI in real time. And on the right-hand side, it says creating your app. This might take a few minutes. And as we can see, if we look at this here, it's pretty much just taking the information we gave it raw and regurgitating it back to us in a nice summary. So it's given us the few key features to implement here: dashboard/budget tracker, the tips tracker, shift management, and financial insights. We've got our design language as laid out by our glassmorphism prompt. We've got our color palette, which we also could have defined in that prompt there. In this case, I left it up to Base44 to automatically come up with the color palette that I wanted to use for this application. But if I wanted to provide even more detail in that initial prompt, I could have said something like, hey, for the primary color, make it so-and-so. The secondary, make it this, accents, glass elements, etc. I could have chosen the particular font family that I like, for instance. Those are all things that I could include in the prompt, but I really just left up to Base44, so hopefully it creates a nice color palette that matches the feel that we're going for in this application. In addition to that, it's given us an app structure with a few key things. So as we can see here, we've got everything from the expense entity to the layout, the budget card component, the dashboard page, tips page, and the records. So in just a few short minutes, it's created FoodFi, a stunning glassmorphic personal finance tracker designed specifically for restaurant employees, featuring budget tracking, tip analytics, and shift management with beautiful frosted glass effects and colorful gradient backgrounds. And on the right-hand side here, we can see how the code actually looks. We've got all of our entities here, like restaurant name, notes, commute minutes, start time, end time. We've got our layout.js, which has everything here. As we can see, it chose React, which I'm quite familiar with. We can see the way that it's actually laid it out with all of our divs and class names all laid out here, along with a few keyframes, which I imagine are the animations. If we click on the components here, we can see under the dashboard that it's created 3 simple components, all being React components: the budget card, the quick stats, and the recent expenses, as well as a few pages, being the dashboard and the tips. And so now, if we want to actually see how it previews, all we have to do is go from the dashboard page up here to the preview tab. And there we go. This is the first version of what FoodFi actually looks like. Okay, so that's interesting. It's added in a little animation here, which makes it look like it's breathing, but it's obviously done it a little too much. So that would have to be dialed back. But as far as we're concerned here, this is the first version of our dashboard on the app. We have FoodFi, Finance Tracker with our 4 pages, Dashboard, Tips Tracker, Shift Management, and Insights, as well as Restaurant Pro. We have our financial dashboard, this month, hours worked, tips earned, all of this, such as food, transport, entertainment, clothing, and recent expenses. So this is all example data here. And if I go back to my dashboard here and I look at everything, this is where I get a full overview of the entire application laid out right here. We've got our overview, FoodFi, a little icon here. We've actually got, this is your personal finance tracker, effortlessly track your income. We can invite users to our base by literally copying the link and sending it out, or hitting the send invites button. If I click this, I can literally share this URL and people can get access to it immediately. Within seconds, I'm already able to share this application to the world and have it work on both a front end and back end basis, or literally just send out emails and give them a certain access level. In addition to that, I can also set my app visibility. So right now it's public with required login to access being checked because I don't want people to be able to log in. But if I want to set it to private, I can also do that as well. Or I can share the app, open the app, as we did. In the users section, we can see all of the users that have signed up for our application, and I'm going to blur out my email there, but you can see that this is me. And in the data tab, we can see all of the data. In this case, this is our simplified backend. We've got our expenses that are already in there. These are some samples that have been created, but if I go and actually delete these here, we'll be able to see that they will be missing from the application. We also have things like shifts and our actual budget here. So it's even put in a few sample pieces of data just to give us an idea of what the application would look like with it fully filled out with real data. In our analytics tab here, we can see things like the total unique users and the top pages, as well as unique users over time. We can also set a custom domain, which by default is going to be the Base44 application ID. But the cool thing is we can actually hook up a custom domain here if we want to use it on our own. Although custom domains are only available on the builder plan or above, it makes it very simple to connect it in just a few simple clicks. The security tab here allows you to control the app security, and you could scan it, starting a security check to make sure nothing's fishy, as well as see who has access to what data entities. Our expenses and shift and budget are all public access, so we'd obviously want to put a little bit more security on that. And to do that, all we would have to do is hit create access rules. And from here, we can see that a creator being the person who created that record is the only person who can access it, or compare a field in this entity with a user property, or check if a user property matches a specific value. So essentially, this is how you would start to build in your preliminary authorization so that users who are at a specific access level, or users who should have access to their own records, can actually make sure that they have access, and the people who shouldn't have access don't. We can also see that that's visible under write/delete access with the write rules inherited from read access rules. Under the code tab here, we can see everything that I talked about earlier from our pages, components, entities, and layout, although it should be said that you can't actually edit any of the code yourself unless you are on a paid plan. But if you're somebody who doesn't know how to code, well, then that wouldn't really apply to you. But if you're somebody like me who wants to make just little tweaks on the fly, it is good to have. But going back to our editor here, we also have built directly in an agents tab. Now, setting up agents is as simple as enabling the AI agents beta, where you can actually build AI agents directly into your app using the Base44 AI infrastructure. Once we've actually enabled the agent, all we have to do is go ahead and hit add your first agent, ask the chat to create an agent for you, describe what role the agent should have and what tasks it should perform, and bang, without any external third-party app, you've got a dedicated agent built into your app from the get-go, natively. In addition to those fun things, we also have things like the logs showing you who's logged in, who's created what, the API section where we can actually see what the example APIs look like. In our case, we're going to blur them out here, but you get the idea. And any settings we can adjust, such as the logo, which I should note has been created for us automatically, or I could go ahead and generate another one here. I could say something as simple as give me a sandwich with a $sign in it and hit generate new logo, and boom, there we go. That's our new logo, sandwich with a $sign. Let me just make sure it says, give me a sandwich with a huge $sign in it. Let's try that again. Boom, there we go. I like that a lot better. So there we go. That's our FoodFi logo. Under app settings, we're also gonna find all of the main app settings, such as the main page being dashboard or tips, because obviously, you can choose whichever one you want. We have our app visibility, as we talked about earlier, making sure the platform badge is visible, which it always will be, unless you actually upgrade, because they're gonna have their watermark on it because you built it in Base44. We've got AI agents enabled, as we did earlier. And then we also have the ability to do a few extra things, such as creating a clone of our app, publishing to app templates for other users to have. Going and actually upgrading allows you to get backend functions, which is a much more of a high-level tactic that you would normally use if you were a developer. But if you're a no-code user, for this part, you really don't need it as much. And ideally, unless you're actually going to be enabling server-side functionality, which is still in its alpha stage, you really won't need. And finally, if you need to, go ahead and delete your app, which we're not going to do in this case. And then finally, under that, right now by default, we have it so that people can log into our application with email and password, and Google authentication is enabled by default. But in addition to that, we can also enable Microsoft authentication and Facebook authentication. Or if we do pay for a premium plan, we can actually set up single sign-on. So that is very high level. So in this case, we really wouldn't need that. These are typically 4 of the most popular ways for people to sign in. And for the most part, if they can't sign in using any of these external third-party methods, they can just create an email and password unique to your app. Going back to the preview here, we can see that this is what the application actually looks like on desktop. But what might it look like on mobile? Well, if we go ahead and hit this little mobile icon here, we can see that this is what it looks like on mobile devices. And at this stage, we can see that it is not very well optimized for mobile devices. While it does look nice on desktop, obviously when we swap to a mobile device, we still want it to be optimized for a mobile device, even if it isn't going to be a mobile app. So let's go ahead and make that change. But first, we're gonna go ahead and actually look at our tips tracker. If we click on the tips tracker page, we can see that this is the separate page for a tips tracker. And if we wanna log a shift or do anything like that, we can't actually do that right now. So can we actually add an expense? No, shift manager and not found. So at this page, I can make a few simple adjustments simply by talking to the chat again. So what I'm gonna do here is actually type in what I would like to change. Now, we're gonna go through a few of the ways that you can actually prompt the AI to change it, from visual edits to full-on discussions. But simply put, I'm gonna just go ahead and say, optimize this for mobile, so it looks proper on a mobile device. I'll go ahead and hit enter on this, and Base44 will begin immediately planning the next steps. Now, it's gonna think for a few seconds here, but what we're hoping to get here is a full optimized mobile version. And if we need to refresh what our preview looks like at any time, all we need to do is go up to this refresh preview button and hit it, because it may not always update right away after the AI makes changes to the code. But as we can see here, it's starting right away with editing the layout, editing the dashboard page, and what I assume will also be editing the tips tracker. So after that, all we have to do is implement each individual feature set prompt by prompt. And once we've done that enough, we should have a full-scale MVP ready to show off to the world and share with our user base. All right, it's finished optimizing the application for mobile devices, and as we can see, this looks much better than before. We have a nice helpful mobile icon here, and look at that. Even though it still has that liquid glass effect, we have a full menu built right in, and we've got a simple finance tracker here with the ability to add expenses, budget overview, transport, and having smart insights. And although this may be a little bit bigger, it's very simple to make those adjustments simply by prompting. So let's go ahead and do that. But in our case, we want to prompt not only by simply typing in things, but actually by pointing the AI in the direction of the actual interface, by showing it what we need it to see. Going back to our desktop view here, I'm going to go to the bottom left and click the visual edit button. And now what we can see here is that when I hover over the specific elements of the page, we can see exactly what I'm editing. So if I hover over budget overview, we can see it's a header 2. We can see that if I hover over a certain icon, it's an SVG, and we can see that component used multiple places on the page. If I hover over this, we can see the specific div, we can see the specific button here, recent expenses, etc. Now, if I want it to actually see that the whole page uses a very interesting breathing animation, all I have to do is go ahead and click this, and I'm giving it the visual edit. And what I can select here is colors, and I can adjust the background colors, the text colors, and advanced tailwind classes, which is more for advanced developers. But what I'm actually going to do here is just simply click this because we don't actually want to edit the colors, and type in, there is a breathing animation that is too much. Remove the animation. So I'm simply going to type in, there's a breathing animation that's too much, remove the animation. Base44 is going to understand what that actually means and go ahead and edit the layout. And hopefully when this page refreshes, this weird breathing animation that it's doing, which would be nice if it was much smaller, is going to be removed. So we're going to see that it's editing layout.js to remove the background breathing animation. So hopefully it understands exactly what I mean by that. And when the page refreshes, we should get that completely removed. And there we go. As it says, it's removed the breathing animation from the background gradients for a cleaner, more stable visual experience. And with that breathing animation gone, I can actually read things a lot better now. And in terms of actually adding anything else on, let's say I wanted to add my shift manager, my insights, my tips tracker, and make it better. Well, it's pretty easy to do that. All I have to do is prompt it. As we can see here, shifts could not be found in the application. So all I would have to do is prompt it to add shifts. But let's say at this stage that I've gone through and prompted everything. I've made a full-scale application or MVP, and I actually want to show it off to the world. Now, before we go about actually publishing this, there are a few key things that I want to go over. Now, you may notice in the top right-hand corner next to the share and publish buttons, there are a few little icons here. Well, if we click on this little first one, which looks like a heart rate, we can see the actual activity monitor with all of the different entries. These are our API connections. Now, this is where we're pulling all of the data from, and we can see the actual responses, 200 meaning okay. We can see the URL that it pulled that from being our API, which I will blur out here. We can see the status, how long it took, when it started and when it was completed, and what method it used. Get is obviously getting information, post is adding information, put and patch are for updating either in whole or in part, and delete is, well, I'm sure you could guess. So this effectively allows me to see all of the requests that are actually coming to my application and what they're actually getting, or posting, or patching, or deleting. And next to that icon, we have another little one here that kind of looks like a code icon. But if we click on this, we can see what the actual files used in this page are. In this case, it comes down to layout.jsx, dashboard.jsx, budgetcard.jsx, quickstats.jsx, recentexpenses.jsx, and if we want to, we can actually go ahead and export the project to GitHub, or even just export the project as zip. Let's say, for instance, that you're a developer and you know how to build websites. Base44 can be a great way to get your starting boilerplate for your website and then bring it over to Visual Studio or wherever else you code, and then continue building the application from there. But the initial point of setting up the application and getting all of these things like the layout set up, getting the initial pages set up, getting the initial colors set up, can all be done for you in a vibe coding tool like this. And then once you want to make it a much more production heavy application, you can simply export it to GitHub or export it as a zip and continue working on it wherever you do. It's a simple way to take any sort of vibe coded application and begin taking it to the next level, typically used for developers. I know I certainly do. It makes processes like building these applications much simpler because as a developer, it's very easy for me to use this as a nice steady base. And then when I'm ready to code it myself and continue building, I can just export it wherever I need to go go, and it's easy for me to continue working. Before I go and actually publish, if I hit share here, we can see that this is the public access to the app. Anyone with this link can access my app. So we're going to blur that out. Or as I mentioned earlier, we could send the invitation. But if we actually hit publish, well, what happens? Well, hitting publish actually allows you to publish the first version of your app. Publishing makes it accessible to users at the public link. And as I mentioned earlier, public access makes it so that there's login required. But if my app is ready, if I'm ready for the world to see exactly what I've built, all I have to do is hit the button that says publish app. And then it's going to tell me everything that I'm either missing or need to do before I actually go about publishing it. In this case, it says this app is missing access rules. Before publishing, keep in mind your app's data is open to everyone and not secure. And to keep your app data private, run a security scan and apply the suggested access rules. So let's go do that quickly. Let's go ahead and run that security scan. And what it's going to do is go ahead and scan all of our data entities and recommend the different types of things that we would put in. Because obviously we want people to access tables that they should only have access to, not the ones meant for admins or higher level employees. So in our case, it's given me a bunch of RLS recommendations. Restrict users to read and write only their own expense records with an admin override. So we're going to go ahead and hit apply fixes. Shift, we're going to do the same thing, add that RLS and add the budget RLS. Now, if you're wondering what RLS actually stands for, it effectively means row level security, which means for each row level, it's the security. Now, I'm massively oversimplifying here, but that's kind of the idea with vibe coding tools. That would be maybe something I would do in a much greater breakdown if I was actually talking about the development side of things. But for now, we can just allow Base44 to actually make the suggested security fixes and allow it to simply add those onto our data entities. So now that we're here and there's no RLS recommendations found, there's no secrets exposed, and no unauthenticated backend functions found, I think we're finally ready to publish our app, assuming that I continued working on it and made the full changes to make it fully functional for the users. So once I hit publish and hit publish app, we would see here that it automatically opens a new link. And as it says here, welcome to FoodFi, sign in to continue. So I can either continue with Google or go ahead and sign up. I'll put a simple test email here and add a simple password, hit create account. And as we can see, the application already has two-factor built in. It allows me to verify my email because it automatically sends out those 6-digit codes. And once the verification code is entered correctly, I get into the main page of my application as a new validated user who can begin, once I actually go about the process of making it fully functional, creating expenses and doing anything in my application. Now, the biggest difference with Base44 at this stage above any other is that this is designed for great simplicity. Now, what I mean by that is that there's a lot of other AI vibe coding tools that run into errors right away because they try and overcomplicate things too much. Base44 really keeps things as simple as possible, allowing you to build things one simple prompt at a time to actually allow you to build a full-scale application. Connecting your front end and back end is all natively in this application. It allows us to go and check our security, our data, add row level security, check individual pieces of information like our users and our agents, which by the way, not many other vibe coding tools have. Effectively, everything you need to run your application, whether it is mobile or whether it is desktop, is in this one space. And it saves a significant portion of time for developers like myself who would go and otherwise do all of these things from scratch in one particular place. And it's a great spot for people looking to build simple mobile and web apps and maybe even export them to make them production level and next level apps. Overall, hopefully this gave you a full-scale understanding of how to get the best possible result from your first initial prompt, make it look amazing, continue to prompt it, and give you a deep understanding of how to access and adjust all of the settings related to your application, and more importantly, what they actually mean. Because hey, maybe you didn't know what RLS meant before, but in terms of actually having an application where people are going to be signing in and making sure that people who shouldn't have access to certain data don't have that access, well, it's important. And it's not something that can be easily glossed over. At the end of the day, Base44 handles the front-end creation, back-end creation, and all you have to do is prompt it the correct way, and you can get a full-scale web and mobile application created for you automatically and tweak it with just a few simple prompts. So what are you going to build with Base44? I hope you enjoyed watching this video, giving a full comprehensive overview of how to use the entire platform. And as always, thank you so much for watching. My name is Josh Mountain, and I'll see you in the next one.